Thank you for joining us at BIV Today, the podcast from the Newsroom of Business in Vancouver. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief. Universities were among the many institutions deeply affected by the 2 years of this pandemic. Their business models have been disrupted by an uncertain climate for revenues and expenses. Their methods of instruction, of course, disrupted by health concerns and restrictions. In the middle of this, Joy Johnson advanced into the role as the first female president of Simon Fraser University. Now, SFU, of course, comprises 30,000 students on 3 campuses in Burnaby, Surrey, and Vancouver, and 160,000 alumni. Good to see you.
It's great to be here.
It's difficult to know where to start with you. But I'm going to ask you a personal question, and this is a left field question. Okay, so we're here today on a day and you are a nurse by early career. We're here on a day in America where Roe v. Wade has shifted the landscape. What do you make of this? What do you make of the U.S. Supreme Court doing this?
Well, that is a little bit out of left field, but I'm happy to answer. In part because not only am I a nurse by background, but I'm a health researcher.
Health researcher in gender studies.
In gender studies, that's right. So I
can't think of someone who would actually be more capable of coming at this issue.
Yeah. So I mean, I totally believe in the right for people to control their own bodies. Men, women, boys, girls, gender diverse people, they should have the right to control their own bodies. And so the Roe v. Wade decision, I think, is a real setback. It's a setback for the United States, but in particular, a setback for women. And I am deeply, deeply concerned about the health consequences because we know what happens when access to abortion is not available. People end up doing 2 things. They have children that they don't necessarily want and can't necessarily afford or support, or they try to seek abortions that might not be safe, and both lead to really dire consequences. So I think this is a bit of a reckoning. I think that in Canada, we need to continue to value the rights that individuals have over their own bodies to choose. And I hope that in Canada, we can continue to hold that line.
For all the women, and I think all the men as well, this issue matters immensely. But where I want to see if it intersects with the university is what do you think this development says about the nature of discourse in the United States and maybe where it perhaps has an impact on us here?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I would say we are probably in a more polarized time than ever before. Right, left, extreme political positions, an unwillingness to really listen to one another on important issues, failure to look at evidence, you name it. And so what does that mean for universities? We have a more important role than ever because we are, in many ways, the public square. We do believe in freedom of expression and in the use of evidence and can hold that space and need to hold that space where people can come together, have civil discourse, sort out different issues, honor evidence, and find a way forward. So I just hope that we continue to value our postsecondary institutions because this is really one of their key purposes.
And when you expand on this, if you can, I wonder what it also means in terms of the amount of time, the allocation, the attention that a university leader now provides to the questions that exist out there about how well we are doing with our discourse at the moment and what the role of a university has to be.
Yeah, I think leaders have to be on top of this. I talk to my colleagues across Canada who are university presidents, and we do see issues arising around academic freedom on campuses. And we do see that polarization of discourse also on our campuses, so it's very, very important for us to be paying attention to this. But to be frank, I think it is really the job of a president to, hold that line and to make sure, because there are many people who would like us to close down certain conversations on our campuses, difficult conversations. And so to really honor freedom of expression, academic freedom, means also that sometimes we have to have conversations that we don't want to hear as well. And so to really create that space, I think is super important.
I don't want to pry too much on this one, but have you had to make decisions since you've been the president on permitting a conversation that you think in your heart, you're like, oh, this one's pretty tough?
So I haven't had that yet. Touch wood. I'm not going to touch the table, but touch wood.
Okay.
And you know, but there was an example when I was vice president research and Andrew Petter was the president. A dynamic that took place, and this was. An individual who was sponsored to come to the university who held very, I would say, a position that I certainly don't agree with on transgender people. Most of us would have found the position offensive. And I think the fine line that we have to be thinking about is that human rights line, whether hate is being invoked. And before someone comes and speaks on your campus, it's really hard to prove the point that they're going to invoke hate. It's hard to predict what they're actually going to say. Mm-hmm. So, it is a difficult space because you want to also make sure that people feel safe on our campuses. And I think that, we kind of threaded that needle as best we could. I do anticipate there'll be other issues like this as we move forward, and we need to find ways, to potentially have these speakers, but also to make sure that there is a counterposition also being made available.
On the, not quite the flip side of that, but certainly in some relation to it, is the fact that universities now have advanced themselves considerably in terms of the diversity of not just student body, but faculty as well.
Yeah.
And again, I'm looking for an understanding of how you're allocating your time in all of this, and in terms of advancing to make sure that the university is as reflective of the community it's serving and the people that it wants to necessarily spring forward into that community for generations.
Yeah, I think this is an important issue of our time. And so when I became president in September 2020, I talked about 3 priorities that I had. And one priority was the student experience. We need to always focus on our students. The other was reconciliation and our work that we had to do around reconciliation. And the third was equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I do believe tone on top matters. I do believe that a president has a role to play, and I have spent considerable time. Indeed, I would say I probably every day of my presidency have done something to try and move the dial ever so slightly, but move the dial in relation to inclusion, because that is really important to a university.
Yeah. Do you have any sense at all of how that might differ from, say, a generation ago for a university president?
Well, I think it's not optional anymore, I would say. So that's number one. And I would say there is also a demand from our community, our students, our faculty and staff to be accountable in this regard. So not just to talk the talk, but to really develop robust plans and to hold ourselves accountable in terms of trying to be a more inclusive university.
There is a provincial review of post-secondary institutions underway right now. It's a regular occurrence.
Yeah.
How do you think this occurrence, though, is maybe different than earlier ones, and what does that put you, in a sense, on notice to argue on behalf of the institution?
Yeah, so, I welcome the review. I think it's good for post-secondary sector to have, a peek under the hood, to look at what's working and what's not. I think what's different right now, just in the way that the questions are being framed for us, is that this is not simply a review looking at 26 unique institutions, but looking at, I would say, the ecosystem. And so there are key questions being asked about how we cooperate with one another, how we can work together, how we can actually be a system. We talk about ourselves as a system. So I think that is important for us. We can do so much more if we don't compete, if we actually collaborate and think about not duplicating, but think about how we can work across our post-secondary system. And I think that's a key question that we need to be thinking about.
Yeah. In the Netherlands, where my daughter's a scientist, everyone has a set of unique faculties that they serve in the country. And there really is almost none of that competition, you would call it. But in a lot of ways, that competition also can kind of force you to go and try to develop, and you can be held back when you're hindered from having a faculty of medicine or a faculty of law or a faculty of business or something like that. What arguments do you want to put forward for SFU?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there are a few arguments. I mean, the other thing is they are looking, part of the review is to look at the funding of post-secondary, and I would say our funding has been pretty flat. We've had 2% increases on our operating budget year over year. And when you think about inflation and you think about other factors, drawing into the university, we're being asked, for example, to provide more services to our students, more mental health support, more sexual assault support, more all of these services, and this is coming out of our operating funds.
Yeah.
We're facing a bit of an issue in terms of trying to maintain a really robust university set of resources to make sure we have top caliber resources for students, but also educational resources. So, all that to say, I do think as well there is an opportunity to talk about the funding for universities. SFU, great university, top of a mountain, 55 years old, though, our main campus. And Arthur Erickson was a builder who had a few challenges in terms of...
I bet.
Yeah. So we've got some maintenance issues, some deferred maintenance that we need to deal with as well. And we need the government to work with us to find some solutions to that.
How much of a solution in there, or at least a part of that anyway, lies with alumni? I mean, the United States appears to have so many benefactors that graduate and donate. And I know SFU has them, and so do other places in the post-secondary sector. But do we have the right conditions in order to encourage alumni to be giving back and back and back?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say you're right. The culture of philanthropy is very different in the United States in the post-secondary sector than it is in Canada. But that being said, we have some amazing alumni who are extremely generous. And, the other thing I would say about our alumni, not only are they generous, but, we have alumni scattered around the world in 140 countries. They're also an incredible opportunity for us, for British Columbia as well, to have touchdown spots, to have connectivity globally through alumni of our post-secondary sector. And so they bring a lot to us, and we need to find ways to continue to leverage our alumni as well, I would say. And so, yeah, there's work to do there. But we need a value proposition for them so that they remain engaged with us and they see that as part of their role.
Yeah. Are tax regimes in the correct place? Are there sufficient incentives for alumni to donate, do you think?
I think there are. I mean, I guess the other thing I would say about donations right now is that the old days of just writing a blank check are done. I think we've got very sophisticated donors who want to see their money used for very specific purposes. And we need, part of the work right now is to really listen well, understand what our donors want and find that alignment. And then demonstrate how we're using their money well. That's the other thing. And so that's something I'm really paying attention to, and that is an important job of a president. Sure.
It's not just the alumni pressure that comes into you in terms of your revenue stream, but there are also commercial pressures. And again, as the universities evolve and as costs become harder to meet at times, is there any budge room around commercial presence on a campus and a greater, essentially a greater pact of some sort that kind of moves over the line that we always thought of in terms of that independence of an institution?
Yeah, I certainly believe in the proposition of public institutions and what they bring to us. But I also believe in industry partnership, absolutely. And we have some amazing industry partnerships. But they are not necessarily partnerships in which we're delivering post-secondary education through those partnerships. These are partnerships for research or for internships or for other ways that we can actually benefit industry. And I think this is more and more important as well, because universities have an important role to play in terms of helping develop R&D, in terms of helping economies continue to grow as well. And we need to be thinking very carefully about that.
Well, you took the role at the loveliest of times, but you must have had an understanding by now of what kind of new reflection at the university there is about its overall role and whether there is emerging any kind of a slightly different vision of what a university ought to provide into the community. What are your thoughts on where your thinking has gone now?
Yeah, so SFU is, in my view, a really cool place, in part because it is an engaged university. And I do really believe in that vision, that universities as public institutions need to be deeply involved in their communities. And SFU is across our 3 campuses with the 3 cities that we engage with. And we need to partner with communities to solve problems, probably more now than ever before. And I think the other thing I'm seeing more and more in terms of an inflection point, as I look at economic plans for this province, I look at where gaps are going to be in terms of employment. Universities are going to have an even greater role to play. 1 million new jobs are going to be created over the next 10 years, and 80% of them are going to require post-secondary education. So I think we need to find ways to kind of partner, think about those opportunities, make sure that we are being responsive. Don't get me wrong, I still continue to believe in the value of a degree in history, a degree in the fine arts, etc. But I think we also need to really take our responsibility seriously to think about how we prepare people as they move into good-paying jobs. And to be clear, our students, they graduate from university, and the majority of them do get good-paying jobs in short period of time in areas of their choice. And so a university degree is, I think, an incredible proposition still.
Yeah, it clearly pays off. The evidence is very clear on that. But we are one of the most expensive places in the world to live. And what I wonder about is how challenging it is, given that almost every other business talks about labor shortages at the moment, challenges of recruitment, challenges of retention, all that. How has that changed the picture for SFU in recent years?
Yeah, I mean, I think that those pressures are really being experienced at SFU in terms of faculty recruitment, staff recruitment, retention, etc. And then you add on a pandemic. And other sectors offering much more flexibility in terms of the work arrangements, etc. So I think that we need to continue to think about, again, the value proposition as a university, as a place to work, what we offer people. And we're thinking about that a lot. We're thinking about the environment that we offer, the way we support people as they move through either their faculty or staff roles, and try to make sure that we are creating, I think, the levers, that really will encourage people to come and to stay. But in certain areas, we are really struggling, I will say, in particular in terms of faculty recruitment. And these are areas where I would say industry is really ambitious as well. So computing science, anything related to analytics, these are very, very competitive positions. And our faculty members know that they can go and get a job in industry and probably triple their salary. Right. So we need to create a value proposition for them that really makes sense for them in terms of working in a great environment, engaging with fantastic students, owning their own IP should they choose to. Yes. Those kinds of dynamics, I think, can be very positive.
It's becoming a self-interested area to explore with someone, but I want to know what you're doing about older workers.
Yeah, so what we're doing is we don't we don't hold any prejudice against in terms of anyone's age at the university. We've got a number of faculty and staff that are well into their 70s. And they continue to contribute incredibly. And so what we need to do is find ways to continue to support them, make sure they feel valued and part of the university, but also make sure that they remain relevant and that we give them the tools to do that. I don't think we can assume that people will stay relevant. They need to kind of get nudged along. We need to create those expectations as well. Yeah. And I think we can do that. And a number of those professors and staff just provide incredible value for us. Yeah.
I ask a lot of leaders of industry and institutions the same sort of question, which is, how are you a different leader now in the pandemic?
Well, I think that for me, in terms of my leadership, I probably have doubled down on trying to be authentic Like, this is a time to be very real with people because they're hurting. And so I would say authentic leadership is really, really important, and to be empathetic. This is not a time to kind of just say smarten up and get into the office, you know. People have struggled. Our students have struggled. We see mental health issues among our students in particular really at a peak point. And so we need to listen, we need to pay attention, and we need to respond. And so I would say these are kind of characteristics that I thought were important, but I would say as a leader, I've really doubled down in both those areas.
Yeah. Are those the same things you've learned about yourself, or just about you as a leader?
I would say, like, I can't really parse that in some ways. I think that I don't really separate myself as a leader from myself as a person. And I actually think that's the best kind of leader, personally, that you show up as you are, and you think about using your own skills and abilities. You think about using the assets that you feel comfortable with to really move forward. And then you surround yourself with super smart people who can actually help you deliver as you need to.
Last area, of course, you have a 5-year term. I'm not going to ask you whether you already want a second term, but that option will likely be around for you. But do you have an understanding now about halfway through this 5-year term? What's the accomplishment you'd like to be able to say, this was me?
So, in some ways, I wish I could have a do-over. I feel like I got gypped out of almost 2 years of my time because I spent my first two years really very operational, trying to just get us through, as you said, right? And I think a president, really wants to make a difference, make a mark, try to move I believe the job of a leader is to leave the institution in better shape than you found it. And so we're just now starting strategic planning. So I'm excited about that. So I'm kind of interested in what's next and to start that process. But I would say I am also very proud of just having us had survived as an institution over the past 2 years. We got to own that.
Not everybody did.
Yeah, not everyone did. And I think that, for the most part, I run into faculty, staff, and students, and they're like, yeah, we didn't even just get through it. We did well. We're whole. Certainly, we're still afraid, but we are whole and we're moving forward, and that's positive. And so I feel proud of that as an institution. I think we've done really well. We've worked closely with public health. We've worked with the sector, and we've been aligned. And I think that says something. Yeah.
It must have helped you as a former nurse, as a former researcher, to pay attention to the science and all of this as well, right? You would have been probably one of the more serene leaders going.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, as particularly having a little bit of background myself in public health, helped a lot. And I actually had a network of colleagues I could call. And actually, I would say on that as well, I knew very early on that our best way to survive was to follow public health guidelines, not go above them, not go below them, follow the guidelines. And always following that line has really helped us a great deal, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, it's been a great conversation. I really thank you for your time. I hope you come back regularly and we can talk.
Love to talk more. Yeah, thank you so much.
Joy Johnson, president of SFU. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief at BIB. Thanks for watching.